Part 28. I have been a thief all night and stole nothing. The kitchen brought the food quickly. The servant entered the house, laid out the things one by one on the small table, filled a bowl of white porridge, and invited Xuan Huaifeng to eat it. Xuan Huaifeng came over and sat down, held the bowl in his hand, felt it was hot, put it down again. He looked back at Bai Xuelan, and asked, "Have you eaten?" "I forgot." Bai Xuelan got out of bed, sat down at the table, and asked the servant to get another bowl and chopsticks, and served him white porridge. Xuan Huaifeng glanced at the table, it was really plain, and said to Bai Xuelan, "Why do you eat this kind of bland food? Ask the kitchen to get some meat dishes." Bai Xuelan asked back, "Why, you love bland food, I should be a contemptuous carnivore." Xuan Huaifeng couldn't help laughing. "I would like to ask you a question. Why is it involved in such a high-level issue? Besides, carnivores don't have any contempt, according to Western scientists, in the food chain. Animals that eat meat are inversely higher than animals that eat grass, and..." He glanced at Bai Xuelan and pursed his lips lightly. After talking for a while, the porridge was a little cold. So he picked up the bowl and took a sip quietly. Bai Xuelan stared at his lips and gently pressed against the edge of the porcelain bowl. The pale red lips and the white jade porcelain were set off, making them breathtakingly beautiful. Throat cannot help but a little thirsty. "And what?" Bai Xuelan asked with a smile. "Are you trying to say that animals that eat meat are always more ferocious than animals that eat grass?" "I actually know that. Even if you say it outright, I will not be angry," Xuan Huaifeng said. "I just said that animals that eat meat are more viable than animals that eat grass." "Such a compliment, but do you imagine everything as if I were slandering you?" Bai Xuelan calmly said. I don't dare. This is just a matter of discussing Western science. Then, there is another point of view. I read it in a French scientific journal. It is that the desires of carnivores are often more important than those of carnivores. Herbivorous animals are strong, what do you think? The shrewd black eyes with a little smile looked at the person opposite with interest. He looked at Xuan Huaifeng feeling uncomfortable, lowered his eyelids slightly, slowly drank 3 or 4 mouthfuls of white porridge, put it in the bowl, faced him and asked earnestly, "What do you think is the way we are now?" "What is it?" Bai Xuelan said. "Do you still need to ask?" "Of course. What I have for you is love. This is your opinion, but I can't agree with it." Xuan Huaifeng paused and said calmly, "Take a 10,000 steps back. Even if you use love as a metaphor, it may not be a good love. In my opinion, it is just a product of indulging in lust. You may think that things like love are stories about desire." Bai Xuelan's expression became serious, and he said calmly, "Please stop for a moment, I won't accept it if you say that." In the past, Xuan Huaifeng would never have had this conversation with him. But after a day's incident, at this moment, the mood is surprisingly peaceful, and since they have been fighting on the battlefield for many years without results, it is okay to shake hands and make peace. Xuan Huaifeng said. "Okay, please explain." He straightened his waist, straightened his sitting posture, and gestured towards Bai Xuelan, asking him to speak freely. Bai Xuelan said, "According to my personal point of view, a thing like love is similar to being a human being. It requires long-term management and a small start. I wonder if you agree?" There is nothing to blame for these 2 sentences. Xuan Huaifeng thought for a while, then nodded objectively. Bai Xuelan went on to say, "Let's talk about being a man first. If you have a lot of success, you should have ambitions, a mind, and create a career. If you don't have success, you will be mediocre. Be a monk for a day, hit the clock for a day, but it's just a mess. A character who eats and waits to die." If it is used as a metaphor for love, the former, because it has a great mind, can be called noble love, and the latter, because it is too mediocre, can be called mediocre and vulgar love. In your heart, what you yearn for is noble love at the spiritual level. Isn't it? Xuan Huaifeng pondered for a moment, then nodded again. However, whether it is a noble life or a mediocre life, as long as it is a human being, there is always an instinctive requirement for food and clothing. Even a great man in history must first solve the need for food and clothing before he can become his great man. Moreover, even if he has become a great man, I think he will have to eat and dress in such mundane things, isn't it? Some things are mundane, but they are essential, and it is necessary to have them in life. Once you have the foundation, you can go to a noble place. Xuan Huaifeng's expression changed slightly when he heard this. He waved to Bai Xuelan and said, "Please stop, I know what to say next. Love can be compared to life, I agree, but that kind of thing is like dressing and eating, but it is a quibble. People will starve to death if they don't dress and eat. This is the basic living condition, but if love does not roll in the quilt every day, is it about to wither? That being said, aren't the girls in the brothel the most qualified to talk about love? And the couples who are in love, separated from each other, should simply divorce." Bai Xuelan listened to what he said with grace, without refuting a word, and said lightly, "You are right to stop this issue. If you and I are arguing with each other, if we can discuss the result, then it's weird." Looking at Xuan Huaifeng, at ease raised his eyebrows and smiled. The handsome face has a subtle charm, but also seems dangerously evil. Xuan Huaifeng was stared at by his black eyes that seemed to be infused with magic power. His wrists trembled slightly, and the piece of pickled cucumber he had just caught slipped down from the tip of the chopsticks. Bai Xuelan's chopsticks also happened to reach the edge of the plate, and they picked it up firmly below, and let out a low laugh. "Master Xuan Shangjai's most proud craftsmanship, don't waste it." He crossed his arms across the table, sandwiched the crispy melon slice, and gently touched Xuan Huaifeng's pale red lips, and said softly, "Open your mouth." Xuan Huaifeng's delicate face turned white. The next second, he swiped the ground again, and he turned and flushed at a loss. As soon as he put the chopsticks down, he stood up, took 2 steps back, raised his hand, and rubbed the remaining salty taste on it. It was as if the pickled cucumber had an incurable venom on it. Xuan Huaifeng rubbed it 2 or 3 times, probably feeling that his actions were too weak. He hated to put his hands down, stood up straight and lowered his head to look at Bai Xuelan. Bai Xuelan was also raising his head and staring at him. He was very big, and he didn't mean to be guilty at all. Xuan Huaifeng felt that kind of gaze was like a lion looking at an antelope under its sharp claws, like kingly pride. Xuan Huaifeng had learned from the past several times, and knew that it would not be a smart way to meet this gaze stubbornly again. He pretended to be thirsty, avoided the hot gaze, walked to the wooden cabinet and poured himself a glass of boiled water, emptied the glass in a few gulps, and said in his usual tone, "After dinner, you have a good rest, I'm going back to my room." Bai Xuelan was silent for a while, but there was no objection. Xuan Huaifeng took his acquiescence and walked towards the door. When he arrived at the door, his heart suddenly moved. He remembered that as soon as he left last night, Bai Xuelan did not know what to do and developed a high fever. This must be prevented first. He had to stop and look back at Bai Xuelan. But Bai Xuelan's emotions, when he doesn't want to be seen through, no one can see through. There is no slight wave on his face, just like a drizzle on the lake in March, and there is a thick fog. Cover up everything. Xuan Huaifeng looked at it for a long time, but he couldn't see whether he was angry or sentimental. Or don't care? Or just put on an unfathomable appearance and deliberately test yourself? Unsure in his heart, Xuan Huaifeng felt very helpless, sighed, and softened his words. I'm really tired today. What's the matter? I'll talk about it tomorrow, okay? Bai Xuelan then said, I have. Are you not allowed to leave? Who are you going to listen to when you say such humiliating words? With a cold smile, the curve of the corners of his lips was like a wound on his face. Xuan Huaifeng pondered for a moment after listening to his tone of finding fault, and then stomped his feet. Really left without looking back. Seeing him go out, Bai Xuelan still kept his original appearance, sitting still on the chair. For a moment, Xuan Huaifeng's figure turned back. On Bai Xuelan's handsome and resolute face, a trace of injured anger surfaced. There is no limit to those anger. Just like the water from the ocean pouring back into the river when the land collapses submerged. With every drowning point, the face with deep facial features that usually wears a pleasant smile becomes creepier and more sinister. Bai Xuelan sat on the chair, trembling with anger. His fine white front teeth clenched tightly and squeaked. Huaifeng, Xuan Huaifeng, Xuan Huaifeng. These three words, like 3 needles, were stuck in his eyes, ears, and heart. Bai Xuelan was full of a crazy impulse, which encouraged him to stand up from the room and run out. This urge made every bone in him ache. But he didn't dare to leave his seat. Because as soon as he stood up, he might have done something bloody and brutal. Although it must be very happy to do it at the moment, but the consequences are bound to be unwilling to see. The breath was stuck in his chest, and he felt a colicky pain in his chest, just like a heart attack patient. There is no cure for this kind of trauma. A shrill sound. He struggled for a long time before opening his mouth and gasping for breath, panting desperately like a dying fish. This instinctive approach seems to have helped him. I don't know how long it took. But with each gasp, my chest became less clogged, at least it didn't hurt so badly. Bai Xuelan continued to take a deep breath for a while before he dared to slowly relax the tense nerves all over his body. Once he relaxed, he felt sweaty all over his body. As if he had been in a hand-to-hand battle. That hard-hearted person secretly scolded Xuan Huaifeng, but he didn't want to use more vicious words to slander his sweetheart. So he had to scold himself for being worthless, and the corners of his lips raised a self-deprecating bleak smile. He loosened his fingers and glanced at it. There were several scratches on the very hard Wanghuali wood armrest. Looking again, the left hand was a little bright red, and it turned out that a small piece of nail was broken on the edge. And it was bleeding. Bai Xuelan looked at his fingernails and thought, God is really omnipotent. When he created a human being, he really wanted to think about everything. Everything can't be changed. Just talking about the color of blood, after changing another one, blue or white, purple or green, it is never so shocking. The most amazing thing is that each person created by God has his own characteristics. Like himself, if he is as gentle and considerate as Lin Qijun, and does not have the domineering arrogance of a wolf, he will not be the Bai Xuelan in Huaifeng's eyes. Another example is Huaifeng. If he was not so stubborn, not so arrogant, and not so ignorant of current affairs, wouldn't he have become another Bai Yunfei? Thinking about it all the way, Bai Xuelan's emotions gradually calmed down. I felt that the intense anger just now was unnecessary. It was because I was not skilled enough, and I needed more experience in the future. He felt that he had calmed down and stood up, slowly pacing back and forth in the room for a few times, reminiscing about a round of arguments with Xuan Huaifeng at dinner, a little inadvertently. Xuan Huaifeng's lips appeared on the edge of the white jade porcelain bowl, reserved and lovely, slowly the tempting scene of drinking porridge. Immediately, I felt a burning heat in my waist. Bai Xuelan stopped pacing and showed a thoughtful expression. Even Huaifeng said that carnivores are nothing to be despised. Natural selection, survival of the fittest, who is to blame? His deep thought was soon over. His footsteps became firm and strong. He walked to the innermost compartment of the house, dug out the hidden key, and opened the copper lock on a 6-drawer chest of red sandalwood and gold lacquer landscape painting. After fiddling a few times under the electric light, I took out a piece of unused incense. This is something brought by his hometown in Shandong. The person who gave it to him said that it was mixed with a secret recipe passed down by his ancestors, and the effect was amazing. Didn't think it would come in handy. Now, I have to be a thief again. In Bai Xuelan's eyes, a wolf-like light flickered when he smelled blood. And he found a brand new foreign lighter and took it out of the room together with the incense. Tonight is not very suitable to be a thief. The big moon above his head illuminates the backyard like a layer of silver gauze, which is very beautiful. Bai Xuelan arrived at the crescent moon gate, grabbed a servant who happened to be passing by, and ordered in a low voice, "Tonight, outside the adjutant's room. Please stay away from it." Without daring to ask a word, he nodded and ran to convey the commander-in-chief's order to the housekeeper. Bai Xuelan easily settled the external defense, walked straight in, and stepped outside Xuan Huaifeng's room. The room was dark, and the lights had been turned on. He tiptoed to the window, put his fingers against the window leaf, and quietly glanced in the gap. Xuan Huaifeng was lying on the bed, his figure undulating gracefully like a silent mountain. Seeing this scene, Bai Xuelan's chest became even hotter, and an impulse surged in his blood vessels. Light the incense stick, and stick the end of the smoky smoke through the window. Today Huaifeng covered the windows, which really helped him a lot. Bai Xuelan smiled bitterly while holding the incense. Even if he is a bandit, he should be a big thief, but now he is a little thief, and his face is really not very glorious. If Huaifeng knew that his status was even lower, and that he was contemptuous, that would be beyond doubt. And even if Huaifeng was fascinated and lost his mind and didn't know anything afterward, Bai Xuelan would still look down on himself. Before meeting Huaifeng, Bai Xuelan really never thought that he would do a lot of things that even he despised himself. Of course, it is even more impossible for him to pretend to have no desires in the face of the person he loves for the sake of a little sense of dignity and face, when Lu Shiwei, who he can't understand at all, still has no desire. From ancient times to the present, the corpses of those who ruined their happiness in order to pretend to be a gentleman are enough to pile up mountains of remorse. Totally stupid. After the incense burnt, Bai Xuelan immediately entered the room. Xuan Huaifeng was fascinated by 10%, and was picked up from the bed, but he was still soft and well-behaved. Bai Xuelan also turned on the light bulb, and the room instantly burst into light. The brightest place was the handsome man between his arms. And Bai Xuelan, like a child who sneaked into the candy house behind his parents' back, his blood was bursting with excitement. After a deep kiss, one hand groped on the lovely body, stripped off the clothes one by one, lowered his head, and kissed from his forehead along the bridge of his nose, lips, chin, neck, all the way. He kissed his fair and firm belly, and his lips lingered on the sweet skin. Compared with Xuan Huaifeng, who was indifferent and distant during the day, no. Compared with Xuan Huaifeng, who left him alone at night and never came back with a heart, this one is really too lovable. People always think about things that they have been deeply longing for all the time, but sometimes they suddenly come to the front, and they will have the emotions of worrying about gains and losses. And worrying about them. When Bai Xuelan encounters other things, it's fine, but when he encounters Xuan Huaifeng, he is not as good as ordinary people. In front of the white jade body as naked as a newborn baby, even though Xuan Huaifeng was unconscious, but Bai Xuelan felt that it was more difficult to deal with than when Xuan Huaifeng was awake. Such a perfect and precious person. Hug him tightly, for fear of hurting him. If you don't hug him tightly, the deadly intimacy in your veins can't be vented. Bai Xuelan thought in a mess. Letting the countless thoughts of praise or admiration, excitement or anxiety fight each other, and printed countless pious kisses on the silky skin. He knows that using incense is the behavior of a villain. A frivolous person who is dazed is a villain among villains. Xuan Huaifeng would never use words like piety for villains. If he heard it, he would definitely show that kind of cold and contemptuous expression like a signboard. The piety of his own, and only he can perceive it. Bai Xuelan tasted a hint of sadness in the ecstasy of eating, and took a light bite on his beautiful collarbone. He also took off his clothes and half kneeled on the bed. Huaifeng is really good. And his limbs are flexible and stretched according to how he arranges his posture. Bai Xuelan was like a person who had been looking forward to the delicious food for decades and could finally eat it in one day, but was very worried about where to start. He sat up from the bed again, hugged Huaifeng to his lap, and gently spread Huaifeng's legs. Everything is ready. Suddenly, he couldn't bear to get up again. It's not entirely unbearable. It's probably also mixed with a guilty conscience and anxiety. Ridiculous. Bai Xuelan has always believed in true villainism. As long as the goal is achieved, he will not dare to do anything bad. But now he is timid. The flames in Bai Xuelan's eyes shone brightly. He held Xuan Huaifeng in his arms, thought for a while, bit his lower lip abruptly, almost biting out a bloodstain from the lower lip. The pain was so bad that he gained a little power to control his desires, and he was cruel, and put the lovely delicious food down from his knees. Headache. Headache. He really hates himself. No prospects. Why do you just like this proud man who practices himself? Why are you so mother-in-law and anticlimactic? But the crotch was still hard and painful, and the pain was almost fatal. Bai Xuelan put Xuan Huaifeng back on the bed carefully and let him lie down comfortably on his back. Really, even sleeping is so beautiful. Bai Xuelan sighed, made up his mind, jumped out of bed, and picked up the discarded clothes one by one. They all picked it up, raised his head again, and saw the nostalgic figure on the bed. His heart trembled. He sighed abruptly again, raised his hand back, and threw all the clothes he had just picked up on the ground again, strode to the bed, and picked up Xuan Huaifeng, who was drowsy and ignorant. The swollen and excited lust rubbed like crazy on the clean body. I'm a carnivore. I'm a lustful love, the aggrieved beast roared, roaring from the depths of his throat. Rubbing against Xuan Huaifeng with the ferocity that would stain Xuan Huaifeng forever and stain his own taste forever. Every inch, flawless, warm and clean skin. Tossed all night. The man's white liquid shot on the pure and beautiful body again and again. But Bai Xuelan was not reconciled. He repeatedly smeared the blood essence from his own body on the body of the sleeper, lest a drop be wasted, and there was a terrifying madness in his eyes. You're right, I'm not a noble love. After venting the surging masculinity all over his body with the momentum of a flash flood, Bai Xuelan ruthlessly said to the former commander, who exuded his own faint musk scent all over his body, and some self-defeating, said this sentence. However, he still did not want his own innocence to be completely publicized. When the eastern sky turned white and gray, Bai Xuelan took back the gaze that had been cast on Xuan Huaifeng, got out of bed, tidied up his clothes, pushed the door open with a squeak, and held the shelf. I went to get a small basin of hot water from the silver round basin on the top. When I came back, I poured cold water. Reached inside with my hand, felt the temperature was right, brought it to the foot of the bed, put it down, rubbed a clean towel, and started to slowly wipe Xuan Huaifeng's body. This is the work of the old mother, and Bai Xuelan doesn't care at all. Just a little uncomfortable. Really uncomfortable. It was not easy to let him get a little taste of his own. It's a shame that I have to wipe it with my own hands. Bai Xuelan was not reconciled, but he still wiped it carefully, just like when he soiled every inch of this body, every inch, every inch, every inch, and cleaned again. After cleaning everything, Bai Xuelan picked up Xuan Huaifeng's clothes from the ground and helped him put them on. Put him in a natural sleeping position on the bed and cover with a thin quilt. Reluctant to lose the right to take a last look, he stepped back and went out. Afraid of awakening the man and revealing his evil deeds, he silently stepped out of the room. Closing the door, Bai Xuelan looked up at the misty white sky, and cursed a swear word in his stomach. Been a thief all night and stole nothing. Seems like something is missing? Damn it. As long as the 3 words Xuan Huaifeng are encountered, what the chief executive does is to lose money. Anything that is given to Bai Xuelan is really a good thing. Even the incense is no exception. Not only is it colorless and odorless, but it doesn't seem to have any sequelae.